you want to open us up?
Yeah, welcome to the Retic Lounge, guys. We have a great one in store for you today. What is this? Episode 68, Lucas, or 67?
68, close to my favorite number.
Oh, 69. We got to run a special or something. But anyways, we are talking with none other than the Scrub Daddy, Scrub Master himself, Steven Kush. Lucas, this is one that I think everyone's going to be a little bit excited about. One I'm definitely excited about because he's worked with every species from mammal to reptile that I could ever want to work with.
We'll get to that towards the end.
I
want to try to keep it on
just
Scrubs.
saying, this man has worked with the animals that one most dreams about. So,
Yeah.
I'm just excited to sit down and talk with him tonight. Lucas, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I felt like, number one, being a Retic owner, and for those of you that listen to the Retic Lounge, for the most part, you either want Retics or have Retics. And I don't know, there's this idea that I've always thought of Scrubs as the Michael Phelps of Retics, the more athletic Retic.
The guy that got me into Retics is constantly talking me out of having Retics, and he's like, you need Scrubs.
Right? Exactly.
Yep. And you don't need your Retics. You just get Scrubs.
So I feel like most people that have Retics, if they don't have Scrubs, have questions, want to know more. And so this was probably one of my most anticipated species spotlight that I wanted to do for our listeners. So we're excited to do that. Before we jump in, though, just want to give a shout out to our Patreon members over at our Retic Lounge Patreon. Appreciate all of you and your support. And we just had a lot of chat in the background that we are going to be providing access to for you guys. If you guys are interested, there's that link down below, patreon.com/TheReticLounge. And for anybody that is new and has subscribed, because we've upped our subscribers over the last month, thank you so much. Hit that notification bell. We have new episodes every Friday. And that's all I have. Are you ready to get Steven on? Oh, disclaimer real quick.
Yep.
Steven just moved not too long ago. Actually, I don't know when exactly, but his internet connection's a little spotty, so you might see him a little blurry. We're going to do our best to salvage as much as we can of the episode to make it smooth. So if we're pausing in between, we just want to make sure that you guys can hear everything, and we're going to do the best that we can to give you guys an awesome episode, because I know that Steven and Scrub Pythons is definitely worth the hype that we're hoping that this episode brings.
Yeah, and from what I've heard so far, we can hear him pretty well. It's just, a little
he's a robot tonight.
Yeah, a little bit like dial up AOL. That's right. What I was saying earlier. So let's get into it.
All right, let's go ahead and bring him on. Whether you're just getting into Retics or you've been breeding for years, the first place you want to visit is Stewart Design. More and more breeders keep showing up at shows, on Morph Market, and are all over social media. Sometimes it may feel possible to get anyone's attention. Stewart Designs helps small businesses like yours do big things through brand clarity, helping entrepreneurs to start and scale businesses that are easy to know and love. Their work can help any company or industry, but they've done a ton of work for ours. Stewart Design created the brands for USARK, Canova, Reach Out Reptiles, Coiled, and dozens of other well-known reptile breeders. Like many of us, the owner of Stewart Design, Blake, is a keeper and breeder who fell in love with Retics through first working with Garrett Hartle. Although Stewart Design does a lot of corporate work, Blake has a passion for working with people in the reptile industry. Stewart Design can help if you're just getting started or you're ready to take things to the next level, you're struggling to stand out and build your presence online or at shows, you don't want to be like the other guys or get lost in the crowd, and you want to make your own way doing what you love. And also, you have big ideas and know your business is special, but you need help sharing it with the reptile community. If something here resonates with you, reach out to Blake and have a conversation. To learn more or get started, visit StewartDesignBrands.com or call them at 855-SD-LOGOS. Clear brands own markets. Stewart Design helps create them. If you are in the market for an enclosure for your reticulated python or any other one of your reptiles, Focus Cubed Habitats is your one-stop shop for not only the best-looking cages on the market, but also provide amazing features and add-ons to your cages. We partnered with Focus Cubed Habitats because they continue to innovate and change the way we house our animals, unlike any other caging company out there. Their cages are designed intelligently and provide the most stylish and secure housing for your animal's comfort and well being. Visit focuscubedhabitats.com for your animal's caging needs. Again, visit focuscubedhabitats.com for some amazing and stylish enclosures.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the Retic Lounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit VivTechProducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit VivTechProducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off.
Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than HeliGuy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at HeliGuySerpents.com and start giving your pets the best. HeliGuy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.HeliGuySerpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today. All right, what's up, Steven?
Pythons. To be here. What's going on, guys?
What's going on, man? It's
Appreciate
great to have
having you on, man.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Let's go ahead with the cheesy, corny way and just kind of introduce yourself and reptiles in general, when that all started for you. Give us the good old-fashioned cheesy podcast intro of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's been lifelong. When I was 1-2 years old, before I can remember, I was watching Steve Irwin all the time. For anybody who has been to a Tinley Park show before, really before COVID, they saw Bubba the alligator out front. He's that big 10-foot alligator that everyone sits on and takes pictures. The original Bubba was at my 4th birthday party, and I was dressed up as Steve Irwin. So I think from there, the writing was on the wall that something like this was coming. I've had some very lucky moments in my life that have really paid off. My pediatrician was heavily involved in the Chicago Herp Society, which is one of the longest, most storied herp societies out there. And they threw an event called Reptile Fest, which kind of take Arlington, for say, the size of the Arlington NRBC, make it 0 sales, all education. And that's what they did once a year. So I was 6, 7, 8 years old, running around that place, holding all the snakes and iguanas, petting tortoises. It was just
that's an awesome experience.
Yeah, it was incredible. And then probably about 8, 9 years old was when I was like, all right, I want to start getting some pets, and went on the YouTube and watched a lot of the early snake bites videos.
Those are my favorite.
And those early days were fun. One of my most vivid memories is I was watching one of the videos, and Brian standing in front of a wall of babies, and he says, he's like, people ask me all the time how I pay for all this, why I breed snakes for a living. And that was just the light bulb moment in my head, that's a thing. And from there on out, I was like, I know what I want to do. And then when I was 13 in 8th grade, we had to do a week-long internship somewhere, kind of just part of the curriculum, and I wanted to do something with reptiles. And I was at that Reptile Fest show introduced to Rob Carmichael, who owned the Wildlife Discovery Center outside of Chicago, where I grew up. And he recently retired and closed down the center, but I ended up doing a week there as a volunteer when I was 13. And I came in as a 6'1", 6'2", 13-year-old, and they didn't think I was 13. And I just kind of kept coming back, and they realized a few months later that I was a lot younger than I was supposed to be. And they're like, you could stay and do free labor for us. And I was like, all right, let's do it. But there were olive pythons, water monitors, king cobras, bushmasters, Bingshan vipers, crocodilians. I mean, it was heaven for me.
Heaven for any
And
reptile person.
to be 13. Oh yeah, but like to be a kid and to walk into that place and basically be able to learn and educate people, kind of learn how to communicate about this thing that I love. It was integral for me, because before that, as everyone does who gets into it, I love ball pythons, and it was all about the morphs, and I was interested in other things, but I was really fascinated with green tree pythons, and but I just didn't really have much of an avenue to gain experience or knowledge, like hands-on. So this was everything I could have ever hoped for, and I ended up working there through high school. During high school, started acquiring more species. The scrub pythons crossed my path when I was about 16, 17 years old, and ever since I got my first one, it was March Tinley 2017. It was on like a little like Tinley classified Facebook page, the red neonate, and I was nervous. I had kept a bunch of pythons, olives, Timors, white lips, but like there was this like allure to scrub pythons that they were just like one step up. They're these heat-seeking demon monsters that are gonna kill you, and they're gonna bite your face off until you want to like chop their heads off with a kitchen knife, and you can't even do that because they're gonna bite you before you can get the knife to them.
So Steven's like, sign me up.
Well, it was always something like I wanted to conquer. I just became fascinated. Listening to all the old Morelia Python radio podcasts I could, just like it was cool because I had an opportunity at the previous Tinley to buy a scrub python. I'd spent all my money already, but I didn't know too much about them. And then shortly thereafter started like there was an old it was like the Ball Python UK forum, and page that laid out all the localities of scrub pythons. And to this day, there's nothing that is better out there as far as kind of like a picture guide to localities of scrub pythons.
Right.
So like
I still use those old forums for the green tree pythons and the retics. Like they like you can go on those old forums and they have just like a gold mine of information.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to be said for how that format worked as opposed to the Facebook format, which quite clearly is not it. But I guess to round out the biography, so to speak, during high school is when I met Forrest Fanning and Desiree, and I went to college for like 6 months, and during that period of time, I was hanging out with Forrest a lot, traveling, and one thing led to the next, and I left school. It wasn't ever for me. I knew it wasn't going to be for me, but I can at least say that I know that now, and moved down to Indianapolis and lived there for about 4.5 years. Was involved with rodents, reptiles, all that stuff. So in that time, definitely was able to gain a lot of very valuable experience, grow my collection, and now here we are today.
I think that, everyone has that childhood story, but like yours kind of took it to the next level where you're able to get some hands-on experience with some pretty crazy species early on. And
yeah,
I can totally see how like, you're like, yep, scrubs, right? Like, because, the reputation of wild-caught scrubs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like a painting on the wall. You just kind of see it kind of play out. So that's awesome, man.
And there's one other thing that I want to touch on also before we get into the scrub bit of things. But what's your opinion? You touched on going to something in Chicago that was mostly educational, the size of Arlington.
Yeah.
What do you think about adding education to, NARBC like we have now? I see a lot of that in the hair industry. I work in the hair industry, and there's a lot of education that goes along with those expos. Yeah, right.
Sorry, I had to.
No, you're good. At least you pulled off the bald barber joke better than most. But no, I mean, I think it would be something I would love to participate in if there were, little rooms off to the side of the expo floor that were just doing education on different species. I think that would go a long way in our hobby.
Yeah, I mean, what was so great was that there was no sales at all. So all the vendors were in it together. You know, a lot of them were members of the Herp Society. There's no this guy hates this guy, and I mean there was probably a little bit of that, but like there was a common goal of educating instead of who's going to make the most money this weekend. I mean, I think so much more good came out of those, and I think they're still happening today. The Reptile Fest shows than most selling shows that are out there. But yeah, it would be great to have stuff like that. It's just like, I guess if you're a show promoter, you're probably getting more money for those tables from people who are making money off those tables. So I guess it would be great. I just think it comes down to the practicality from a business standpoint. It's probably a reason why it hasn't really been a thing up until now.
Right. And you talk about the educational standpoint. I think we can even say the same as far as the old school forums. Everyone would go on there to contribute and to share, and people would then make posts for feedback, and you'd get a bunch of people who would get tagged for like to share the information. But Facebook seems today to always be this one up type of ordeal, and I really miss those old school forum days. It's a bummer. I think probably a couple weeks ago, I got a new kick with green tree pythons. I went back to just read some shit that I read when I was like 16, and just to see how people conduct themselves on there, versus how things are conducted now on Facebook. It's kind of just a bummer. I'm hoping that we can turn it around, but.
Yeah, I mean, social media has done, great things for the hobby, especially for new people, but it's at least to me, it's trash than the things that I cherish the most about, my teenage years in the hobby, the 2010 to like 2016 era. I feel like communities were a lot tighter back then. Somehow with more connection, we become more fragmented, which is it's interesting to me.
Interesting concept for sure.
And now there's more shows than ever. There's a lot of accessibility, and I guess it's watered it down a little bit. The old MVF forum, like that was where you go. Yeah. Like if you want like the best minds in green tree pythons, they went to this place, as opposed to today. There's dozens of chondro Facebook groups that you see the same posts in all of them.
Yep.
And why wouldn't you, if you're trying to promote your stuff, try to get it out there as far as you can. But I think the impact of that one central forum carries a lot more weight.
Yeah, no, I agree. If it's okay with you guys, I kind of want to start to get into this component of scrub pythons. So when did you acquire your first scrub python, and what locality was it?
So it was a Barneck. It's a male that I still have, and this gets into a longer conversation about locality type, but he was sold to me as a sarong. Today you call him a maniquari. I call him one of my favorite snakes, and he's a Barneck. But he was a red neonate, could have been more than a couple of months old. I think for me, that was the absolute perfect place to start. Scrub pythons, they have this reputation of being aggressive snakes. Like they're not like other pythons or other snakes as far as how they act. And my arms are pretty scar free, and I have well over 100 of these snakes. It couldn't be further from the truth. You take a big sample size of reticulated pythons, green tree pythons, ball pythons, corn snakes. you're going to get a variety of different demeanors. And I have, I have a good number of scrub pythons that I don't, handle like the one in the picture on the thumbnail where it's coming at my face. That would not end well for me.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not 9 out of 10 of them. That's maybe 1 out of every 10 to 15 of them.
Yeah.
And the same could be said for almost every other reptile.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that facet. As a matter of fact, I remember thinking the other day, like I came across a few Facebook posts in a single day where I saw ball pythons nipping, being defensive. And I was like, we don't think of ball pythons as doing that, but there's always like exceptions and there's always outliers. And what I contribute to scrubs, and I want you to kind of go into this to tell me whether I'm right or I'm wrong, but just from videos, because I've actually never held or seen a scrub in person.
Really?
I mean, I think I might have seen some at shows and like but I've never interacted with a scrub python. And I love them. I'm fascinated by them. I actually know someone who potentially is going to be making some Hera scrubs this year, and I'm doing everything in my power to convince them to hold back the clutch and send me a pair just to park here. What I feel like scrubs are really not far behind, and if anything, at the same level, and you might even say more, but the intelligence that they have is like just beyond most other species of snakes out there. And I think they're capable of that higher intellectual thinking that retics are capable of, where you can work with most animals to get them to understand that human interaction is going to be part of their life.
Yes, for sure. So I guess I'll preface everything I'm going to say about scrub pythons with that I'm heavily biased. But this does come with, I've at this point, and I say this with a lot of gratitude, I've been able to work with hundreds upon hundreds of species of snakes. And without a doubt, scrub pythons are the most intelligent snake I've ever come across.
Awesome.
And I don't think there's one that I could compare them to. There's the most comparable snake is probably a reticulated python, especially like a dwarf locality, like a Halmahera or Ternate or something like that, similar size range. Because once you get like 15, 17 foot mainlands, they're really not the same snake at all. But a retic of a comparable size to a scrub python is probably the closest comparison you can get. But it's one of the things I love the most about them. They're calculated. They're confident. They're physically capable, and they know that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they're about. As much as they know that they can mess you up, they can also know that you are no threat to them.
Right.
And that this is routine. They get very accustomed to routine. If I take the snake out the same way every week when I clean it, or a few times a week when I clean them, if I put them in the same spot or I hold them the same way, they just get accustomed to it. And when I go through and I take care of all my snakes, for the most part they're exiting the enclosure because they do have a strong feeding response. And unless one is in the hide box and totally, unengaged, you're not really going in there and spot cleaning a poop in the corner, because they do have insanely large strike ranges. It's just the physiology.
That's why I describe them as like the Michael Phelps of like compared to retics, because they're just like they're like the retic, but like 10 times more athletic.
Mm-hmm. I mean, just that prehensile tail, their ability to, I've had a scrub python be a 10-foot scrub python completely stretched out lengthwise along a bank of cages, curl a tail, like 8 inches of its tail around a caster wheel, in 2 seconds, pull its body all the way back and up the rack. That's from insane. A dead stop.
That's insane.
I mean, they are insanely athletic. You have to be, they're tricky too.
That'll stop you in your tracks the first time you see it very quick.
Yeah, one thing I will say is I have moments every now and then where I'm like, I got brought back down to earth as far as what these snakes are capable of, because I mean, there was a narrative for a long time with scrub pythons, primarily perpetrated by one person, that they are just these heat-seeking missile demons, and you got to basically treat them like a venomous snake.
Is it controversial to say who that person is? Sorry, I'm not too savvy
I
in the
just
scrub
don't want to.
python world.
I'm not a big
You're
fan.
fine. You're fine.
That's fair.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. But anybody who knows scrub pythons knows exactly, like from a while ago, knows exactly who I'm talking about.
I'll ask my buddy
And
when I see him.
I'm gonna join the Facebook groups. I'll find out.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys off the air. I mean, it's this guy's not involved in the community anymore. But it was like a form of gatekeeping where this guy didn't want other people to have scrub pythons. He wanted to be the guy with scrub pythons, and to do that
sounds like a great business model.
I mean, yeah, right. But in the process, this reputation was just kind of born, and it doesn't come from nothing. Like I'm saying, they are potentially all of that. Just most of them are. They have these capabilities. Their physiology is their physiology. They don't. It's just not. They don't live up to that reputation, especially captive bred animals. Of course, there's outliers, but in my collection right now, I have, easily over 50 captive bred pythons, and of that group, 2 to 3 of them I wouldn't just hold like this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean
and it holds true of other species. Same with early captive wild retics, and even like the locality stuff now. They can be wild ticks.
Yeah, I mean,
what it is.
I only have a group of 6 pretty full-grown adults, and of that 6, I have 2 that I can handle and everything. It's just I wouldn't let them up near my face, and I definitely can tell when their body language changes, and it's not as comfortable a situation.
Right. And Nathan, just going off of like the localities or retics that we have and like F1s and stuff.
Oh yeah, the locality definitely plays into it.
You got to see Phil's F1 Halmahera, and just the massive difference that these Halmaheras have compared to, a standard captive bred, even cross locality Superdorf or even a mainland. But
I thought some of my retics could be spazzes, but I was totally wrong.
Yeah, my Halmahera is here.
My female Halmahera retics was. Sorry.
No, go for it. I want you to keep going. I want to
sure
hear about that.
I'm sure it's relevant.
I'll just say, my female Halmahera retic is the craziest snake I've ever worked with.
When you first come near the enclosure, like I've never seen a snake react like that. Like I have retics behind me, and they definitely react when I'm near the glass, but those snakes just like
they're ready.
Yeah, they're like little flying carpets. They're just like up in the air and like launching themselves to see if they can get past the glass.
Yeah.
Now I will say I have siblings, 2 F1s, a male and female, and getting them out of the enclosure and turning that food response is always fun. But I will say I've worked with them heavily, and once I have them out, I just posted a video on my Instagram. They're puppies. They're sweet. Once you have them out, they are totally fine. But anytime I enter that enclosure and I open it, you never know what's going to happen. you just don't know what's going to happen. And I feel like with some scrubs, like
that's prepping you for scrubs.
Right. The way in my mind that I see scrubs on videos and stuff is I've seen people open the enclosure, take them out and stuff. And scrubs, I feel like, are very much you enter that enclosure and they're kind of just like they want to explore you more than you want to explore them. And if you're able to break off any of the response of feeding or whatever the case may be, I feel like it could be the same as my Halmas. They'll be fine. But I've seen some videos of some pretty intense reaction, and not from me. It's intense. I'm sure for someone who works with them, it's typical scrub behavior, or maybe not. You could tell us, Steven, but they have this presence about them that must be respected. But I'm sure it's some of the most rewarding interactions that you've ever had.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm saying about their confidence.
Yeah.
What scrub pythons and retics, like one way they differ, unless there are rats in the room, when you open that enclosure, the scrub python's not just flying out like, oh, okay, now what? They know what they're shooting for before they strike, and they're, you know, you can see in their eyes that there's a lot of, you know, for a snake, relatively speaking, a lot of brain activity going on there. You know, they're very analytical, but yes, when you can kind of figure out how to, you know, broach that interaction to where you are interacting with the snake and it's calm and it's moving through your hands, it's a super rewarding feeling. You know, especially knowing like it's not really a snake, you can muscle around. You know, they're going to have their way if they really want to. So, you know, it takes some tact as far as that goes. You know, I mean, over time, I've kind of figured out a number of things that can make a scrub python more comfortable in interaction. But you know, like you know, like you said, and I agree, the reward at the end is very gratifying.
I love the retic, like you open up the enclosure, they come out and you're like, ah, like that's literally a retic, as they come out mouth open just like an idiot, and they're like, and then they stop and they're like, now what? Like that was literally perfect retic description of a hungry retic. Because literally I see that all the time. I'll open up, they'll fly out mouth open, and then they sit there and they're like, why is there no food?
They miss and they're like, what happened?
Right. But yeah, no, scrubs, every video I've ever seen of them they're just very, I guess the one word is precise.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm obsessed with is I always love the higher intellect, and I love monitors. Probably won't be able to keep big species monitor anytime soon or ever, because my wife would probably leave me. But so anytime I can own a snake that you know gets close to the thinking level of a monitor, even though there's really the comparison's hard to make. But scrubs are it. Scrubs are definitely it.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this. I want to get into some informative information here. So I kind of want to, I want to know from you, like, what localities do you work with? And then what localities are there? Because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that there are, there's been some recently discovered new localities.
Yeah, you could say that. So, you know, to just break down the complex, there are the 5 species within Somalia that are considered the scrub pythons. You know, you also have the Bowen's pythons and the Owenpelli pythons, which I'm not sure at the moment if they are classified in Somalia. They were at one point, if they're not now. But of the scrub pythons, you have obviously the kinghorn eye, which are the Australian scrubs, which we don't have in the U.S. hobby. There are two males.
Are those the biggest?
Yes. Yeah, those are the ones you see that, like that guy in the river in Australia with the retic sized scrub python. That's what that is.
Those giant heads, yeah.
Yeah, they're incredible. There are 2 males in the country. They're at Reptile Gardens in South Dakota, and that's it. To my knowledge, at least.
That's a bummer.
And then the 4 that are available in the hobby are Somalia amethystina, which is kind of the broad spectrum scrub python.
Like the classic scrub.
Yeah, there's lots of different localities fall under that classification. The Morelia viridis of scrub pythons, kind of a comparison. There's Somalia traceae, which are the Halmahera scrub pythons. Somalia nauta, which are the Tannenbar scrubs, and then Somalia classilepis, which are the Moluccan scrubs.
Do you have a favorite?
I mean, I think I'd have to say the Barnex.
Classic.
Because
I mean, that was your first one, right?
Yeah, the Moluccans are. I mean, they're 1A. You know, if I had to keep one scrub python, it would be really difficult. If I could keep one type and work with them and breed them, it would absolutely be Barnex, because the variety and the chance for line breeding with them is just absolutely endless. Where with Moluccans, because the color palette is more limited than Barnex, there's not as much to do, even though there is quite a bit. Just the, you know, from tan to dark brown to black to gold. I mean, that whole spectrum, the pattern, there's no two that are alike. I'd have to say that the Barnecks are my favorite.
Yeah, I would definitely say for me, I just from everything that I've looked at, the Halmaheras are probably mine. But aren't the Halmaheras a different subspecies?
Yeah, so that's Traceae. So they're full species separate. And then within Amethystina, there are localities from above the dividing range in West Papua, below the range, island types, and they're all very different from each other. But so just to go over that, you have the Barnecks, which people will separate into different locality types. I have feelings about that, but the typical locality types you'll see are Sarong, Jayapura, Manokwari, and then you'll see some that are labeled like Kofiau or Wageo or Arfak. A lot of these locality type names that are just placed on green tree pythons and tree monitors and whatnot. You have the southern types, which would be like the highland types, which are not actually in fact highland dwelling, but they look different than what you call the Maruki types. And then you have sort of island locality types go Aru, Key Island on the southern portion, and then Biak on the northern portion as a very, very distinctive population. And then within the mainland, you have the Wamena type on the north, which people say there aren't scrubs in Wamena. Those are from Jayapura. I know for a fact there's scrubs in Wamena. They don't look like what we call Wamenas. Those are from Jayapura, but there are also Barnecks in Jayapura. It's like, and Jaipur is just a big city in West Papua,
Right,
like
exactly.
are there scrub pythons that are, like what are we really calling what here? I may have missed one or two in my description, but
this story sounds all too familiar.
Yeah, I mean the confusion,
same with everything.
But yeah, I mean I also hear the similarities with the green tree pythons as well. But what I love that even you guys are doing with the scrubs is you guys are including that word type at the end of the localities, and I really wish the retic industry would adopt that.
It's irresponsible not to for the scrub pythons. I know the retics. There have been many more true documented. At least I'm not quite as up to date as you guys are, but with scrubs, I to my knowledge, I couldn't even say there's one, especially with the Barnecks. Like the Halmaheras were. Like the expedition that discovered that species a lot more legitimate, like Dave Barker and real legitimate herpetoculturists from the US. But like with the Barnecks, I do not label mine with locality type. If somebody wants me to like describe one, well, what would you roughly call it? It's like, yeah, maybe like sarong type, but here look at its sibling. It has almost no pattern at all. Sarong types are known for heavy banding. Okay, so what is this sibling from hundreds of miles away across the continent? Like, right. Are you kidding me? And I'm not saying there aren't locality type differences, but maybe they're not pattern.
Right.
Maybe their scalation, maybe their size, maybe pattern the variable that is not constant across the board. It's variable across the range potentially.
Yeah, for someone like me that's a locality geek in the retic and the green tree python world, it's very anxiety provoking.
Yeah, but so I mean, but the thing is, I find it funny that as a hobby, what do we call a locality type? We call it something that looks different.
Right.
Who are we to say that that's what makes something different from place to place? Right. I don't know. Like, why is that? Why is their outside appearance what makes them different from Sarong on the northwest to Jayapura, damn near at the border of PNG?
Especially areas of that size, you can't imagine that the landscaping and the environment is so drastically different that time and time again it would result in the same exact phenotypic expression. I'm sure it varies across the board.
I mean, it probably does. And from what I've seen of captive clutches from adults that look very similar, it would support the theory that locality type and phenotype with bar necks are not the tell.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, out of those more rare, uncommon that are maybe quote unquote newer, which ones are you working with, and kind of what are your plans to? Because you've done a great job with the bar necks. What are you at? Like you're at second generation, or are you getting to
So I've only been able to, have first generation
first gen?
clutches. My
Okay.
oldest animals that I produced were 2020s.
Okay.
And there's
I
not a ton of success within the U.S. in terms of captive bred clutches, right?
there's really never been anyone who's gotten it down routine.
It's not like breeding retics where a
The
6-year-old can do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, Chris Foley and David Means are the guys who had done it the longest time for the law, like with the most success routinely. Chris still has some scrub pythons, and though he's transitioned much more to monitors, and he produced croc monitors last year twice. And then Yasser Mustafa was one of the guys early 2000s who had some clutches. The Barkers had some success, produced some beautiful animals. Dave Prada, I think he's in New York, produced some of the best dark banded barnecks that have ever been seen. I have lucky to have an adult female that he produced that, in my opinion, is one of like the 5 nicest females I've ever seen. But a lot of those people who were doing it aren't doing it now. There's been success intermittently with different people, but it's been one of those things where, I'm leaving out some other notable people, but there's been success, but then the animals kind of disappear and the collection gets sold off. And where did they go? Oh, they went here. Oh, they died. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
And now there's more imports coming in, and but then when they were banned in Florida, not so many imports anymore. Joe Swatowski's not posting a list every month with 5 to 10 scrub pythons on it. And, that then it becomes a bit more of a problem where it's like, all right, now we really have to rely on the captive breeding. So
I'm happy to see it. And don't get me wrong. Like I love the idea of importation. Do I wish retics could be imported still? Like it's a, it strings me back and forth on both. Like I would absolutely love it. Do I think it should be limited or permitted? Yeah, absolutely. But like, I love the idea of bringing in imports, but I think any time that we can work really hard to establish a captive bred colony of animals, that's so important for herpetoculture in the U.S. Because not everyone's equipped to own a wild caught animal. Not everyone's equipped to not everyone knows how to treat for parasites, how to establish a wild caught animal. And speaking of, how is it establishing wild caught scrubs?
I would say across the board, it's not terribly difficult compared to some other species. I found that the best way to do it is just kind of keep them in real simple, dark, quiet quarantine setups, and just offer whatever food items you may until they decide to eat one. And
here's my pinky.
Yeah, exactly. But the fresh wild caught scrubs, they can be a lot more skittish. Oftentimes just based on the process of importation, they come in a bit underweight, dehydrated. Sometimes people get them, don't do the due diligence as far as with a fresh wild caught. So then you're working with a couple more weeks of attrition before, you may get your hands on them. But with all that said, I think, I've gotten quite a few wild caught scrub python. I mean, probably north of 50 individuals over time, and most of them have established for me. And some of my adult breeders now are animals that came in as wild caught 2, 3, 4-year-olds. So not incredibly difficult, but not a complete cakewalk either.
Yeah. What is their enclosure like? What do you keep them in from neos to adults? I know that, like you said, they have a prehensile tail, so obviously they're arboreal, or at the very least semi arboreal.
Yeah, for sure.
So what do you do for them?
So, and apparently in scrub pythons, it's a controversial take, but I raise the young ones in tubs. I have some racks with some slightly taller tubs that I use for them. I do that until about the size where they can go into a 2-foot cubic enclosure. And then, upgrade until the point of my adult cages are 6 feet long, 2 feet deep, and 2.5 feet tall. And I have some monsters that are in 8x2x3s. They're like 12-foot individuals.
Wow.
Wait, so you're saying monsters, and you're describing a 12-foot scrub?
Yeah, a 12-foot scrub is like a 6'9" person. They don't get that big. You'd have to Jay Brewer them to get them 13.
I'm so happy you said. I was actually going to ask you: is it as easy to get a scrub obese as it is a retic?
Easier. Their metabolisms
Really?
are not as fast as retics. Yeah,
That's surprising.
Yeah, I imagine if you were just throwing food at them with how they're built, they could get fat fast.
Yeah, and there is a middle ground of a healthy weight scrub python.
Right.
Some of the dogma for a while was feed your scrub pythons 3-4 times a year, feed babies every third week. I'm like,
What?
that's malnutrition.
That's a snake
buddy.
that's going to kill you.
I mean, it's a snake that will never breed under any circumstances or be like a solid captive.
I mean, I feel like a snake that you feed that much, like your interaction with them is zero. Like the thing is always going to want to eat.
Yeah, so it's a balancing act with them. When they're young, feed them as much as you want within reason. They're going to use all of those calories for healthy growth. I've never seen a fat young scrub python.
Same with
Yeah.
retics. I tell people you'll never see an obese retic that's under 2 years old.
Yeah, so basically the first 2 years with occasional discrepancies, they eat weekly. They can handle solid size food items and they do better on them. If you want to see a lump, the snake is going to grow faster and healthier to be able to cope for the increase of the food size. So I've also learned that the hard way. I've had some scrub pythons that I've raised on some smaller food items. They take a lot longer to grow. They have smaller heads come adulthood. To me, they just don't look like the most robust scrub python that they can. They're still great. I've had some that have bred, but to me, I just, in my experience, the larger meals have been more beneficial. By the time they reach about like a 65-gram small rat to medium rat, I back them down to every other week. By the time they can eat a large rat, about every third week. And then adults, it's very much seasonal on the feeding. Right now, most of my adults haven't eaten for about 8 weeks now. But then there's times where they're eating every week for a month, and then for a few weeks, and meals every third week. Get the breeding season. Females that lay, they'll get weekly meals until I can see they put some weight on. Then they're back up every other week. Once their body weight is back, now they're back on their normal schedule. So with the adults, there really isn't like a routine to it. It's very much what's the plan with this animal? What does it need to eat for? And how much intake does it need during a particular time of year?
Yeah, it seems like during the cooler months you're feeding less, and then when it lays, and it needs more nutrition, needs to gain more weight, you're feeding them more and giving them and getting those calories up in order for it to get back to that size. And then there's this I don't want to say maintenance feeding, but there's definitely a feeding regimen to make sure they don't get overweight. I mean, it's I feel like most species we should be using that method of eyeballing and understanding and observing and knowing our animals and what they need, as opposed to the ball python method, which is a medium rat every week or a large rat every week, and worrying about grams and worrying about all these different things where I've gotten to that with my retics now, even the younger ones, where I used to be a lot more regimented, and now I'm just like, if you're not pacing, if you're not looking for food, if you're not lunging out for food, the snake can hold off. But then when I do feed it, I'll feed it a bigger meal and sometimes smaller meals.
And then on the other end of the spectrum, I'm sitting in my rattlesnake room right now. These guys, they roommate. They don't eat from about late October until mid-March. People out there, some of their pythons. That's absolutely insane. Those snakes do not brood in the wild. They'll have periods of less prey availability, but that doesn't mean that they're in a semi-active state where they're not eating and hardly drinking water for months and months on end. So, it's all about, treating your snake appropriately to what it is, and then also knowing, okay, this is what a healthy retic, scrub python, green tree, carpet python looks like, and feed accordingly to what is a healthy individual within the representative species.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I want to go back to like the F1, F2, or you're working with F1s, but you talk about
Barneck stuff.
Yeah, I mean the Barneck stuff, or just in general. Is there a pretty drastic difference in behavior and I don't even know if this is a word, ownability, like people's ability to keep these animals?
Well, I mean, we were talking about the Halmaheras earlier. Is there a Halmahera of the scrub pythons that like is just a little bit more playful to work with?
Yeah, like locality wise across the board, are there some easier to work with, some that are more difficult? What's your experience with that?
I would say across the board, they're really pretty similar. Halmahera scrubs they're different in the way they act, but I wouldn't say they're more aggressive or defensive one way or another. They're just different snakes. They're a lot more secretive. They don't move around nearly as much as Barnecks or Moluccans, but once they're established, they I guess I'll preface it by saying they are much harder to establish as imports. Some of them, a lot of them never do. So what I was saying earlier about scrubs being relatively easy to establish doesn't always apply to the Halmaheras. But otherwise, I would say they're all fairly similar in temperament. The Tannenbar scrubs, which also happen to be the smallest ones, kind of have the reputation as being the most kind of touchy and quick defensive, which in my experience with them, which hasn't been that long, it took me about 6 years to find any of them. I have 3 pairs now, but they're all wild caught. It holds more true, but I also never had captive bred Tannenbar scrubs, especially ones that I've raised, so I really can't say. Every baby that I've produced is puppy dog tame, to the point where, if there was a 3-year-old in here, I could take out some of my scrub pythons and put it around their neck, and I'd be 100% confident nothing bad's going to happen. That a lot of it, I think, does come down to how I raise them as well, but it's nothing too crazy.
Can you give us information on how you go about establishing captives and how you go about handling them?
Yeah.
And so that, your potential buyers and people who buy these animals from you have a good experience?
Yeah. So, from a feeding husbandry standpoint, they're across the board. They're fairly straightforward, similar to other species. There can be some problem feeders. Some of them want to take birds at first, but I really have, other than animals that were born with either defects or something that was very clearly wrong. Really haven't had failure to thrive in baby scrub pythons. I had some that have taken the better part of a year to take their first meal on with their own, by their own volition. But after that, they do fine. Obviously, they're well behind their siblings, but they can sustain themselves for quite a while. As far as the handling and whatnot goes, from out of the egg, I grab them like this, because that's the main kind of trigger for their defensiveness is something coming from above them. They love being above you, above the action, going up and away. That's how scrub pythons feel comfortable.
Mhm.
Sounds like a
So
super dwarf retic.
yeah, and one that climbs even better.
Yeah, exactly.
Way better. Yeah.
And so from out of the egg, I go in up top, almost like the talon of a bird. That's how I grab them, and it just desensitizes them to that top down reaction. I really try to and almost never use hooks with the younger animals, taking them out. Especially because I haven't sold a ton of scrubs that I produce. Hardly any, but I'm trying to, one of my missions with this is to kind of break this long lasting stigma that's on the scrub pythons, which I find to be entirely untrue. And what better way to do that than to be able to sell captive bred scrub pythons that are calmer than most ball pythons, and with nothing special. I'm doing this just every week or twice a week when I clean their enclosures. I'm not handling them all the time. I'm not handling them for long periods of time. It's just those interactions that go well, that go the same every time. It creates calmer animals. I have a guy who bought a pair of the Barnecks from my first clutch, like probably a year and a half ago or so, and he messaged me after he got them. He was like, "I'm almost disappointed. These things are not acting like scrub pythons." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I guess."
It's like I was up for the challenge. I didn't get the challenge.
Yeah, sorry, this thing can crawl up on your head and you can, fall asleep on your couch with it. Yeah, it's just, it's incredible what these animals can be when they're handled properly, raised the right way.
What does it take to get on your short list?
On my short list for what, for scrubs?
Yeah, to buy.
I mean, just reach out to me.
But you said you didn't sell many of them or things like that. So I mean, is there?
I just haven't, because I've held a lot of them back. I just
that's when someone has a passion for a species, when they've produced a bunch of them and they're like, nah, I don't care to really sell any. Like, I just want to keep them all.
To me, I'm looking at my collection. I'm like, with my yearlings, my babies, 3-year-olds, like they're better than all my adults. So why not just keep them and sell adults when the time comes? I want to produce multi-generation, and it's not, trust me. I mean, I'd like to make money with the scrub pythons, and I've definitely have sold a number of them, and I'm very grateful for that. But I don't care if I'm selling babies for 3,000 a piece or 500 a piece. I'd surely like to get 3,000, but it's not going to stop me from breeding them. I want to see what my 5th generation can look like in 20 years or 25 years or whatever. And some of them, they obviously, if for whoever doesn't know, they're almost all scrub pythons go through an ontogenic color change. So they're born on the spectrum of orange to red to kind of brown, depending on the locality type, with the exception of Halmaheras, which are born with their adult coloration, or as close to as they can, which is very interesting. So a lot of times you won't really see, you might even see no pattern at all for the first 2 sheds. And then in a year, the animal is barred top to bottom and very heavily contrasted.
That's so cool.
Unlike with the retics, you can probably, to the best of your ability, pick out holdbacks right out of the egg.
Yeah, easy.
With the occasional, I produced one Barneck this year, which came out like purplish silver. Okay, that's a holdback. That doesn't happen. But otherwise, you really have to give them time to come into their own a little bit. Typically, it takes about a year.
Yeah, it's kind of like the chondro world, where like there might be some
not quite so bad. But
yeah, I mean to some variation degree, but I think that's really cool. Like, so you mentioned ontogenic color change, and I did not I knew that they were born a little, but I never made the connection of that term to that, but that's kind of exactly what they do, I guess. Because I have seen some pretty reddish orange babies, but for some reason, just never looked far enough into it to where I actually realized, like, no, it's going through a full color change.
Yeah, which is very, very interesting. It's one of my favorite parts about it too, especially producing more clutches, trying to be able to like key out before the first shed, before like the second shed. Okay, this is one that I know is going to be special, or this is the one that I think will be the best one out of the clutch. Just to kind of like test myself. I'm not making sales off of that, but it's just it's interesting just because we don't have a really large sample size of captive breeding. It's not like there's none. There's probably recently like 5 to 10 clutches probably produced in the world every year. Like outside of Indonesia. There's a handful of people in Europe who are doing a good job with them. And quite a few people here in the US, especially over the last few years, who have had some good success breeding scrub pythons. So, I always kind of like to keep track of that to see patterns that come up. One thing that I've been seeing a little bit of, which could be absolutely nothing, but could be something, is I have a theory that scrub pythons might be temperature sex determinant. The clutches that have been incubated higher seem to be more male heavy. The clutches that are incubated cooler seem to be more female heavy.
Lucas, you're muted again.
Muted.
Good job.
Sounded like a great point.
You got me. Man, it's been a while since I've done that, but shit. All right.
This is something we've kind of touched on even in Retics recently, so I'm excited to hear what Lucas wanted to say.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I'm experimenting with that this year. So I'm incubating at like degree and a half less. I'm doing 86 to like 87 max with my pure Solaire clutch that's in the incubator right now, with the idea that I'm gonna end up with a very heavy female ratio, and I'm very excited to share the results because I've typically have incubated at around 87 and a half to 88, and my clutches have been, I don't want to say 50-50, but it hasn't been anything drastic. Maybe I've had like 14-9 female heavy. But I'm interested to see what the 86 to 87 range instead of 88, 87.5 does.
Yeah. And, it's interesting to look at it like this because some of the more like typical species that are known to be temperature sex determinant are, geckos, crocodilians, and the swing is like 82 females, 89 males. That's pretty significant. If we're looking like 86 females, 88 males, could that be thinking too hard? Maybe. But I will say from my 2020 year of holdbacks, I have some that were produced by another guy who incubated cooler as well. I incubated cool that year. My ratio is like 3.15. And from 2022, I had 3 clutches, incubated them all a little bit higher, and I'm like 4 males heavy on my ratio. So that's one small sample size, but I think especially the 3.15 is kind of telling of where there's smoke, there might be fire. So might as well look into it. If it goes nowhere, okay, but it could be interesting.
If you don't mind, and I know it's not commonplace where scrubs are bred successfully in captivity. So I don't want you to share maybe any information that you might not want to share, but I am interested on the breeding parameters and what you do to cycle females, the temperatures you keep your animals at throughout the year and then through breeding season, and then what's the temperature range that you shoot for incubation. Kind of like if you were to give a little like zip folder or a snapshot of breeding Scrubs 101, what does that look like?
So I'll preface this by saying I'm still very much figuring it out.
You got it most figured out compared to others, but I appreciate the humbleness.
Well, Maybe not, because I have such a large sample size to go off of that, you throw enough shit against the wall, inevitably something might stick. This year I'm breeding 19 adult females. I sure hope I'll get something.
Yeah, I guess so.
That makes sense.
So, but I know people who've have had one pair they've bred, and then they produce from that one pair. To me, that's almost more significant than going 3 for 16. But with that said, this is the version 1 preliminary caveman scrub python breeding temp. And really, it's nothing crazy compared to other pythons.
No, and actually, I love that. That's like an honor to even like that. That to me is so fulfilling to work with a species where you're on the ground level of trying to understand and learn. And that, I don't know. To me, there's just that's something that makes my gear spin. That there's excitement in that.
It's one of the things that excited me the most, was knowing that this was an area where there were some people who were very passionate about it and had large collections, but it really hadn't been brought to the mainstream yet. I mean, especially like growing up, seeing the ball python community, the people that did the best were the ones who had that new morph, like the first people with the pieds, with the GHIs, with whatever. And I just thought it was cool to like pioneer a thing,
right?
And show people why this is so cool. Obviously, it's different when it's a species or a species complex compared to a morph, but to me, it kind of fulfilled a similar kind of desire, or something that I saw elsewhere. And I'm like, that would be really cool to be involved in. So yeah, I mean, that's something that motivates me very much about the scrub pythons is being on the ground floor. And since I've been involved, I mean, I've seen barnecks go from $300 a piece to some selling for over $2,000 a piece. That's not the main motivation by far, but it's a really, really cool kind of side effect of the popularity increasing. So I guess a little bit of a tangent away from the breeding, but that's definitely something that inspires me as far as having my involvement with these scrub pythons. So
I'll take fault on the tangent. That was on me.
I took the ball and ran with it. So with breeding, it's interesting. It doesn't seem to be quite as like regimented as ball pythons or retics. There have been clutches that have hit the ground at all times of the year. The earliest clutches that I've had or I've seen were like January, February hitting the ground, all the way to people getting fertile eggs in July. The earliest that I've ever had a female lay was like early to mid January. It was a slug clutch. And then the latest I've had was the end of July, also a slug clutch. All of my good clutches have come from like March until like early June. So over the summer is kind of like prep for breeding season, either kind of cutting females down who have the body weight or feeding females up that have the body weight. But come fall time, that's kind of when I want them to have their, what I feel is appropriate body weight. And then kind of like mid to late fall, kind of around right now, drop temperatures, reduce feeding, and kind of start to put them through a little bit of a cycle.
Drop temperatures to what?
Good call.
Inside baseball, Lucas.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going too fast. So ambient temperatures I typically keep mine at year round are like 78 to 81 degrees. Hold on,
I'm gonna real quick. 78 to 81 ambient. Are you providing them with a hotspot as well?
Honestly, off season, no.
Cool, because I keep my retics and my chondros in my garage anywhere between 79 to 84.
Yeah. I mean, I've had breeding, not going to happen. But as far as just keeping them thriving, digesting well, growing well, ambient is very effective for it. So I will provide supplemental heat during the cool down, during the breeding season. Even, to males. I have all my males in my bottom cages on my room. Typically I have 3 cages stacked high, males in the bottom, females in the 2 top cages. And, during the cool downs, especially in the winter, if those males don't have supplemental heat, that cage will never get above 72 degrees. And then they can't really digest meals too efficiently. And it just, things don't go quite as well. The cool down for the males is always very important for, sperm production and whatnot. But I haven't done it the same every year, but this year I've taken them down to like upper 60s, low 70s at night during the cool down period. During the day, kind of back up to like 76, maybe 77 on a warmer day. So nothing too crazy. I know people who've taken them into the low 60s, even upper 50s. And
that's no supplemental heat?
I think with supplemental heat, but where their ambient temperature is getting into the, into the upper 50s or low 60s at night.
That's pretty cool.
And and I don't think I've seen more breeding success from that. So I don't know if that's necessary. They can tolerate colder temperatures, but is that part of the equation? I don't know. I don't, until it seems necessary, I don't really feel like taking my scrub pythons down that low routinely. But then once you kind of bring temperatures back up, I think I started cooling down early this year because I moved, and it was kind of like a function of my move. I wasn't able to set them up properly up front. I just recently finished redoing my garage. They've been in my living room for a month now without any heat or light. So I'm like, it's winter now, guys. But typically if I wasn't moving, I would probably be early into the cool down now, and like by the beginning of January, starting to bring them back up and start to get meals into them. Doesn't really follow the typical seasonality, especially in the US. But what I have seen so far in my breeding and from other people, January and February are prime lock times. And heavy follicular development happening during those times. With scrub pythons, as opposed to other species, the females need to eat while they're breeding. If they don't have food intake, they just won't ovulate. From my knowledge, retics typically will go off of food when the females are ready to go. I've only ever had.
If they don't go off, they dramatically slow down.
I've never had a female scrub go off of food any sooner than about 2 weeks prior to ovulation. And I find those meals vitally important to them having the kind of caloric ability to ovulate, to decide, hey, I'm not going to eat food for quite a few months, especially in the biology of that animal. Their incubation period is about 90 days. That's 3 more months on top of another 2 months of them not eating. They need to be able to, one, nourish all of those ovum and keep themselves alive for that long period of time. A skinny snake is not doing that, and it's certainly not doing it well. So in my opinion, they need that caloric intake for ovulation. So during that period, I'm probably feeding them a moderate size meal every 2 or 3 weeks. Out of the cool down, though.
Moderate, you're talking about like 2 times their body size, or?
Oh, like you can see a lump, but not from that angle. Like,
okay.
Like a 10-foot female, like a smaller end jumbo rat, maybe around 300 grams. Right out of their cool down, though, what I'll do is give them a smaller meal just to kind of get that metabolism kicked in again. If it's still a little cool, nothing where it's going to be crazy, but then giant meal, 2 colossal rats for a big female, and give them a few days, throw that male in. I've been doing pairings now. I feel like with the scrub pythons, pairings will kind of spur follicular development.
I've noticed
which I
the
think
same
is,
thing with retics too.
and I know some people that won't pair their retics until the female is off food.
Yeah, it's hit or miss for me at least. I have some females that like I won't because I know their food response is insane, but others that
Yeah.
I've raised as babies that I know their behavior, I'll do it early. And oftentimes, if I'll do an early introduction, it's not very long after a couple of heavy meals where they'll go off of food, and I can't help but think that it's possibly, you put a male in there and they start to get the idea that like, oh, things are happening.
Okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I've seen kind of the same thing with mine.
Yeah.
Okay. So then during that time, temperatures are going back up. When I want the females to be, ovulating and their follicular development to be happening, temperatures are really back to about normal. Um, Basking temperatures are about 86, 87 degrees, 88 degrees. And I have those available 24/7 for them. And they surely will utilize it during that time. Scrubs aren't really heavy baskers in my experience, but a female who's developing follicles at certain points during that process, she is very much seeking that heat. So that's definitely important, kind of contrary to my ambient keeping otherwise. But for those adult females, they definitely with any snake, but they will utilize that basking site for sure. And like I've said, typically ovulations are occurring anywhere between late January and like early May, which is a pretty big window. But they've even been I've had examples of outside either of those windows. But like February, March into April is like the most success that I've had, the best clutches, the highest fertility, kind of around those times. And then with incubation, the coolest I've incubated at was 86, and then at day 70, slowly decreasing it to where temperatures are down to about 84 and a half. Scrub python eggs, for some reason, disproportionately to other snakes, just give off a lot of heat. And some people early on breeding scrub pythons lost clutches to overheating in the last 10 to 20 days of incubation. So bigger egg boxes and then temperature drops were utilized, and that kind of neutralized the threat of the overheating. So I have yet to incubate a clutch straight temperature all the way through. I know people who have, and they've had success with it. I just haven't done it myself. I've incubated some clutches a little bit higher, 87, 87 and a half, probably parts of the box hitting 88. And I've had worse luck with fecundity of the clutch. And then I feel like the babies have been a bit weaker from the higher temperature incubations, which I think kind of exists across the board with a lot of species. Hardier babies seem to be produced by cooler temperatures. I know it can be overdone because I've done it. The year that I had scrub pythons at 84 and a half, I had ball pythons in the incubator, and they were some bucked up ball pythons. They hatched like a day like 78, and were like they were very messed up. I think I had to put a couple of them down, but so I found too low for at least ball pythons. But then scrub pythons, I would say, if I had to give it a range, they really do have a range of when they can hatch. The earliest I've seen is about 70 to 75 days. The latest I've had was a baby hatch at, I think, day 96. I would say average is probably like 85.
Okay. So
but,
pretty similar to retics.
Yeah, similar for sure.
So I'm gonna let Nathan take over. I wanted to real quick kind of like summarize and kind of recap. If you have any final things you wanted to like that you had on your heart or on your mind that you wanted to share about scrub pythons, because I know Nathan wanted to take the time to talk to you about some of the other animals that you work with. But is there anything else about scrub pythons that you want to mention? And while you do that, I am going to run and take a piss because I have to pee out of my mind right now.
Hell yeah.
So I'm gonna let you do that, and if you don't really have anything else you want to say, I'm gonna let Nathan talk to you about all the other species that he's obsessed with that you keep.
All right. I guess to button up scrub pythons, for me, I've worked with hundreds of different species of reptiles and animals in general. And pythons have always kind of been where I land at the end of the day as far as what I'm most passionate about. To me, scrub pythons kind of they encapsulate a bunch of different aspects about pythons that I love all in the same animal. So, as everybody is, I'm fascinated with like the large constrictors. Those big snakes are just, they are what they are. They're freaks of nature. Scrub pythons kind of they fill that without going over the top. They're not a snake you need 3 people to work with that, is a serious risk to your physical health. Although a big constrictor, over 10 feet can potentially be, in some situations. But, they're no 18-foot berm or retic. I love arboreals. I love green tree pythons, carpets, tree boas. And so that arboreal nature, that prehensile tail really does it for me. I like their slim body structure. They're pretty weightless. When you're holding them, they're holding you as much as you're holding them.
I've got to experience it a couple times. It's something different, even especially aside from the retics. Like, they're very much more in control. Yeah,
and I like that a lot. It's an interaction. You're not chasing the snake, and it's also not sitting there like a rock. It's they're very deliberate. They're, like I've been saying, they're confident. You need to give them your attention, but I think almost the biggest benefit of that is you get to just witness their behaviors, and they're fascinating. It's a small thing, but they feel velvety and incredible. They have these giant overlapping kind of very shallow scales that it literally just feels like velvet. They
sounds exactly like what I was saying when I got into retics.
But another thing that I love about them is just the variety. Across the different species and phenotypes, there's easily over 30 different looks within scrub pythons, not even considering all the different varieties within Barnecks or Highlands or Halmaheras. So it's not like olive pythons. I have a pair of olive pythons. I love olive pythons. Every olive python's an olive python, and they'll always be
Yeah.
albinos. They're just pale yellow olive pythons. There's so much depth to the color palette of scrub pythons, and no two really look alike. Especially within the Barnecks. I mean, I could keep going, but to me, they're just everything that I love about pythons wrapped into one animal is what a scrub python is. And to me, they're my favorite animals in the entire world. I could never see myself not keeping them.
Nice. So yeah, Lucas mentioned that I wanted to talk about some of the other species that you've gotten to work with over the years. Which, I mean, at this point, it's what haven't you worked with more in the reptile side of things?
Still quite a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, any of the dream monitor species, any of the dream snake species, you've been there, done that. But
yeah,
I mean, I guess since you said you're in the rattlesnake room right now, like,
yes,
what are some of your favorite hots you've gotten to work with over the years?
I'm as far as actual hands-on work with them, I'm still relatively new. Just a few years in. I've been around them since when I started that job when I was 13. As far as my collection here, my favorites would be like my Mangshan vipers, my Ethiopian mountain viper. I mean, the montane rattlesnakes are really my obsession. all the different localities of clobberi I've gotten to keep. They're incredible.
What rattlesnakes did you say?
Just all like the montane species, that the ones that are from like the Southwest, like where I am, and then into Mexico. They're all relatively small. They come from elevations that are typically 3,000 to 8,000 feet. They come from these kind of cooler climates where, you'll find a rattlesnake you can temp gun the ground in the winter and it's 45 degrees. It's a climate that you don't necessarily think of as being suitable for reptiles, but yet they thrive. I mean, they're some of the most beautiful snakes, if not animals, in the entire world. The ridge-nosed rattlesnake complex, the Willardi, is potentially, if I had to pick one complex within rattlesnakes, I would say those are my favorite. They're just
do the midget fadeds fall under that montane?
That sounds politically incorrect.
That's just what
Just
they're
saying.
called it. So yeah, I mean, do those fall under montane or no?
They would be like just sub-montane. The thing is, they'll like from a captivity standpoint can live in a similar climate.
Okay.
I don't know quite as much about those compared to like the ones that I keep, but I don't believe they're quite as high elevation.
Oh, okay, yeah, that would make sense.
But even like blacktail rattlesnakes, I keep a few different localities of them. You can find them fairly low, 2,500, but then in Arizona there's some that are like 7,000 feet up. So it's all kind of, that montane is kind of a blanket term, but the lancehead rattlesnakes, I'm actually looking at one right now. They're another one that's just absolutely fascinating. They take like a Russell's viper and a Bothrops and like put them into one. They have like cool spider web pattern on them. They're incredible. I could probably talk about these for about as long as I could talk about scrub pythons. I've found a huge passion with these, and what's awesome for me is that physically they're about the opposite of scrub pythons. They're these tiny little rattlesnakes that they're fast. They're they act completely differently. Their care is completely different. They're very small compared to obviously scrub pythons being larger. The one thing that I love about these is I can go find them in the wild, in my backyard essentially. And being able to see a species in the wild that I keep has been transformative as far as understanding their care. Camping in the mountains where a snake that literally is 3 feet away from me, its ancestors came from, waking up in the middle of the night and freezing my ass off because I didn't expect New Mexico to be so cold.
Yeah.
It really puts everything in perspective. Like, man, these tiny little snakes that I keep, they do it like it's nothing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm here in Salt Lake, and then even southern Utah. I'm amazed that the snakes are able to endure the winters that we have here.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So to be able to go observe them in the wild, learn about what times of day they're active in these areas, how, where do we find them, actually finding them, and like, okay, this is how they are in the wild. I can replicate this in a cage. That's something that one day I'd love to do with the scrub pythons, but I'm very fortunate to be able to do with the rattlesnakes, as frequently as a few times a year.
Yeah, I think it's a I don't know, it hits the dopamine and serotonin different in your brain when you're able to experience that, see that, and you're keeping them, and you're plugging and playing with husbandry indoors and trying to keep them like that. It's a dream of mine to be able to go to Indonesia and, or to the areas of the snakes that I keep and, take a temp gun and be able to do all that. But that's a pipe dream right now. One day it'll happen, but not anytime soon. But yeah, I think that's awesome that you can go outside, see the species that you're keeping and be able to study that. I mean, it's like the inner child in us, right? Like we all go and we catch snakes outside when we're kids, and but now you're an adult and you still get to do that, but like you're also getting to keep them and try to propagate and breed and understand them, and it's like being a kid, but you're an adult and you know more, so it's cooler.
Yep. And just being out there, in this some of the most beautiful terrain in the world, no cell service, you don't know what the hell's going on at home. I'm not listening to music. I'm there with nature. The reset button is just, it's really incredible. And, especially in the digital concrete jungle world of today, it really is amazing what, I feel great for long afterward. And if, like right now I've I can see the mountains and I haven't been to them yet because I've been so busy moving it. Like it's hurting my soul a little bit. So
yeah, I feel you there. My wife and I like to get away into the mountains and vacation and things like that. And when it, too long to that, it hurts. Now I gotta take us off of the rattlesnake conversation. I gotta ask you, what's your favorite species of monitors that you've worked with?
Croc monitors.
Yeah,
without a doubt.
I was
It's an easy one.
besides croc monitors, it's tree monitors, right?
The laces are a close second for me.
Okay.
Laces are.
I've always been partial to the
awesome.
larger monitors. I like the tree monitors. I've worked with all of them except for the
Too skittish.
Bowline.
Yeah.
They're not like for me as far as a monitor goes. When I was first working at my old job back outside of Chicago, we had water monitors, big black throats, Komodo at the end. I didn't get to work with the Komodo, but experienced the Komodo. And like, that's what I like about monitor lizards. I like the
big, like,
dude,
prehistoric aspect of them.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, they're just to me less flighty and less like very high strung. And I got to go to the Reptilandia for Texas Carpet Fest and got to scratch the head of a Komodo, and literally it was everything that I've like I didn't even expect to be able to do that when I got there, and it was like a dream that like I never knew I had, but like when I did it, I was like, this is the best day of my life.
Yeah, Komodos are next level. I've been fortunate enough to be able to interact with Komodos as well, and they're all that. They're all that. They're nothing. There's nothing like a Komodo dragon. This the closest you can get is a croc monitor, but to me, croc monitors are almost like the scrub python of the monitors.
They're really cool, but can also kill you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, just that they're big. They're not quite the biggest, but they're that arboreal nature. You could argue that the croc monitor is the most intelligent of the monitors, above the Komodo.
Could you imagine being out in the wild and looking up 25 feet and seeing this massive monitor above you? Like that's a croc monitor.
Yeah, I mean, it probably saw you 200 feet ago and is even further up in the tree now.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that would be insane. But yeah, I love croc monitors. I'll certainly have them again someday. They're just what's going on up in their heads is just it's not the same for other monitors. It's different. They know how capable they are, and they're every bit as capable as you think they are. I'm very fortunate to work with quite a few and no incidents, but we've all seen the incidents, and oh my God, are those ugly. That makes any snake look like a freaking puppy dog.
Makes any bite from any animal look attainable and reasonable.
I learned actually recently that I think it was on our last, the last species spotlight that we did with tree monitors, but I learned that every monitor species has some form of venom. It's pretty freaking insane that not only do you have to deal with jagged ass teeth from a croc, but then you also have to deal with the massive infection and effects of their saliva that could potentially kill you.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's something to think about.
No kidding.
It's
Things to
you
consider.
can't. It's easy to put it out of your mind, but it's still very much there, no matter how much you want to deny it with
Right.
the monitor.
Right.
But
As
yeah,
much
like
as
some of my
you
worst
might
fights have
trust
been
it.
monitor fights.
Yeah, I was gonna say, as much as you might trust it, as much as you've had great interactions, I guarantee you, it's probably still a little faint thought in the back of the mind, like this thing could
Yeah.
do some damage.
Yeah, for sure. And get bit by even a tree monitor, you're never worried about getting tapped by a snake again. I mean, I really haven't, for how many scrub pythons I have, I've taken very, very few bites ever. I maybe get 1 or 2 a year. And the biggest one I've been bitten by was a 10-footer, bit me on the back of my calf. Not even remotely close to a green tree monitor bite. Like
there you go, Nathan.
No, I mean, and not that the green tree monitor was like the end of the world, but it hurt far more than the 10-foot scrub python.
But the tree monitors aren't very keen to use their mouth, are they? Like they're not very nippy in the first place.
No, I had it coming.
Nathan's hoping.
No,
He's like
wait, Lucas, hear me out.
He's like, please save me here.
Yeah, well, I will say we were doing a video, and
I saw the video when you got bit.
Well, there you go. So I got bit for a reason, and that's typically not how I like to.
Wait, hold on. Not everyone has seen this video. What happened?
Yeah.
Oh, it was quite a long time ago. Forrest and I were pulling the green tree monitors out of a cage for Brian Barczyk, and we had like a bunch of people there for like a pre-Tinley barbecue, and we went in and just grabbed the animals, and I grabbed the male, and I kind of got him like closer to the hips and just turned around and just grabbed my hand and sat there for a minute, and everyone laughed at me, and it was cool. So
it was cool.
Yeah, so
only
things to not do with monitors. Just forcefully grab them, and if you're going to grab them behind the head or with gloves on. That would be my suggestion.
Right. Don't be a talon coming from the top and grabbing their midsection.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I will say I've been lucky with tricolor monitors, croc monitors, the bigger species, laces. I've never had a bite. So it's very doable. And especially once you can get like a relationship with an animal with feeding. I was never big on socializing, mostly because I just didn't really have the time. But they know you as the food guy. They don't want to mess up the food guy unless the food guy backs them into a corner, or that's not really something that animal cares to do. So if you can have a good relationship with the animal when it comes to feeding, chances are you're going to have a pretty good a good experience keeping that monitor.
I feel like I'm the same. Like if you keep me fed, I'm happy.
That's all of us.
Good thing to know.
So moving out of the reptiles, just kind of wrapping up here. So my last name's Katz. My dad's name is Bob Katz. I know you've worked with some in the past, as well as a couple other cat species like lynx, I believe. How was that? What was that like?
Oh man, as different from what we do as you can. Back at the Wildlife Discovery Center, I was able to form a pretty close relationship with the bobcat there, and I mean, it's something I'd love to do again. You can't travel, you can't have a sick day. You that is your special needs child.
Okay.
That's your part-time job. It's like the reward of that is you have this incredible experience of having basically a friendship with this feline that's natural instinct is to kill you and is very capable of killing you at any moment. They know where the jugular is. They can jump.
Oh, yeah.
Any of these cat species, they can be on your neck before you know it. You can hope they don't want to kill you. They want you around instead of want you not around.
Yeah.
But with that said, that relationship you're not getting that with a dog. You're not getting like that's something that only comes with an animal like a bobcat or a serval or
Yeah, like an apex predator feline.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not like the scrub pythons, but that confidence that that animal has is just like it's palpable. Um, so, yeah, I mean, it was absolutely incredible. I've been lucky enough on on individual occasions to interact with some other big cats, a couple servals, a couple mountain lions, a couple tigers, and it's just when you go up to like the tiger level, you're like, oh, I don't know if this is for me.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Shit.
Mountain lions were incredible.
Some lines
But,
need to be drawn.
Mountain lions are pretty damn awesome. I got the opportunity when I lived in Florida, well, I guess no, not the same thing. I'm thinking of Florida Panthers, but was able to see one in the wild when I was like probably 9 years old. When I was
Oh, that's what I'm scared of most here in Utah.
what, Florida Panthers?
No,
I'd
sorry,
love to
mountain
see
lions.
some
Mountain lions. Sorry,
lions. We actually,
sorry.
about a little over a year ago, we were road cruising in the Chiricahuas and didn't see anything that night. And on the way back, we saw a baby mountain lion crossing the street with a snake in its mouth.
Oh, that's awesome.
Very brief. It just ran across in front of us. And it was bobcat size, but with a long tail. It's like the only thing that can be out here is a mountain lion, and there was most certainly a snake in this thing's mouth. So
That's pretty.
that
cool.
was a special experience. I haven't seen any big ones. My last trip out here when we were camping, we found a fresh print about 50 feet from the campsite one morning, so that was pretty cool. But
That's one way to
no
describe it. That's for sure.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah. So, which is weird. There wasn't a path of it. It was just one. So it must have kind of come down and been like, "Nah, I'm going back." So
Alien cat.
yeah, exactly. I mean, we're in alien territory out here. So you never know. But yeah, the big cats, I'd love to do something again one day. I know that where I am and aspirations I have for travel and whatnot, it wouldn't work. You need to be, you need to raise that animal from a baby and interact with it on a daily basis. And it's certain people can do that, but if you can't do that, don't do it. Don't make it end bad. Don't make it end bad. So and now we're making Tiger King Part 2, and you're the star. Look at you. So
I love that. Man, Nathan, you got any other species you want to highlight?
No. I mean, I kind of hit everything that I wanted to talk about. Yeah, no intentions of owning big cats ever. Just know you had some fun experiences.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Most of them.
Hey, Steven, we appreciate you coming on tonight, spending your time with
Absolutely.
us.
Yeah, had a lot of fun.
Going over the hurdles, switching rooms, and doing all the fun stuff to make this work out. But I think it's pretty successful. So
yeah, no, I agree as well. I mean, video quality is not there, but the audio, I think we're going to be able to get a great episode from this. And if you don't mind sharing with our listeners, where can they find you on social media if you want to share that?
Yeah, I mean, just right now, Instagram and Facebook. It's ScrubShepherd on Instagram and just Steven Kush on Facebook. I've been pretty absent from social media for about a year or so, but I plan on kind of slowly getting a little more involved. Yeah, I mean, it has its pluses, but the negatives are you don't sell as many snakes. But yeah, I mean, if anyone has questions about scrub pythons or really anything we talked about here, shoot me a message, and I'm more than happy to talk about anything.
Yeah, appreciate having you on, Steven. Let us know if I'd love to down the road have you back on again. And I mean, I know at the very least at some point I'll be having a scrub my collection, so we'll be in touch.
Sounds like a plan to me.
All right, Steven, have a good one. Thanks again, man.
All right, thank you guys. Good night.
Good night.
Nathan, don't forget it's us here.
Yep.
All right. Dude, extremely exciting episode that we got to do. I've never been more hyped to own a species that I've recently learned more about. And the more now that I got the green tree pythons and I have found this desire to want to branch out. When I started breeding retics 3-4 years ago, I was pretty set on sticking with them and that being the niche. And then now the green tree pythons. And now I find myself wanting to keep a little bit of everything.
You find yourself experiencing the Lucas syndrome.
Yeah, no, just a little bit of everything. I don't want a lot of bit of a little. I want just a little bit of
a lot of everything.
Right, exactly. Like I'll be getting some peacock monitors down the road from VivTech, and
just make sure you don't get a divorce anytime soon.
No, as long as it stays in the garage, we're good. As long as it stays in the garage.
Hey, I've seen that garage, and you're running out of space, my friend.
We're moving things out. We're making some room. I gotta get rid of the metal rack in the back. But anyways,
no, this was a fun one. I'm super excited for everyone to hear it. I actually, on my way down to Mesquite, Nevada, get to stop in St. George, get to hang out with my buddy Aspen Mahan, and get to hang out with his scrub pythons a little bit, his tree monitors. So yeah, I'm
dude,
excited.
That's heaven right there. Scrub
yeah,
and tree monitors.
our last 2 species spotlight. I get to experience it all, so
Awesome.
It'll be fun.
All right, appreciate all of you for listening. Again, if you guys want to hang out, get some backseat access on some information, and join the absolute best, and I'm saying best, Retic Patreon out there, go ahead and join the Retic Lounge. It's only $5 a month for our lowest tier. That gives you access to our Discord and just about access to mostly everything right now that we're doing. We're trying to provide some more content that we're going to be doing soon, but come hanging out. It's $5 a month, but yeah. You got anything else, Nathan?
Nope, that's it. Have a good night. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you, everyone.